So I've been shooting on the Osmo Pocket 3 for the past few months, and it is an incredible camera, but it is not that straightforward when it comes to getting the best video possible. So let's break down the settings you want to change, the settings you want to keep, and everything in between. Alright, so here is your main controls. Obviously you can turn on the gimbal initially, so we're switched off here. As you can see, the gimbal will automatically kind of recalibrate to its default position. You turn that on, that will turn on the gimbal. At any time you can switch between portrait recording and horizontal recording just by changing the format of the screen. You can see that it says switch to 4K resolution here. And on this screen here, we get a few important controls. First off is you actually get your tilt control here, and you can tap this button right here on the right-hand side of the screen, and this will actually change to a zoom control. So if that's zooming or moving your gimbal around, just tap that button and that will go back to an axis control. If we move down on our gimbal, you can tap at any point, tap the joystick in twice and the gimbal will recenter, or you can tap it 3 times and you'll go to selfie mode, as you can see, just like that. Or if you don't want to tap that 3 times, you can just tap that button in the bottom right hand corner and that will flip the orientation of the camera as well. The next most important section here is the video resolution and controls, as you can see. So along the top, this is where you get your video resolution. You can actually change the aspect ratio at the top here as well, so you can go from 16:9 to 1:1, and you can see that your top maximum resolution will actually go down there because of course you're just using less pixels in a 1:1 size. So we want to stay on 4K. If you are in Europe, you're going to want to be on 25 frames a second. If you're in America, you might want to shoot on 24 or 30 frames a second. This is for standard kind of normal video, but if you're wanting to shoot in slow motion, you could go up to 50 frames a second or 60 frames a second. That will allow you to slow your footage by 50% or a little bit more. You can see that if we flip this one down, we will tap continue here. Again, you get different resolution controls for recording in portrait mode, as you can see. So let's talk about automatic versus pro camera controls. On the Osmo Pocket 3, you can decide whether to shoot in manual exposures, manual white balance, or allow the Osmo Pocket to actually do it itself. This really comes down to what are you using your Osmo for. Because I'm mixing this in with YouTube videos, I'm mainly using this actually as a vlogging camera. I actually want those settings to be automatic because it's going to allow the Osmo to work everything out itself, give me great looking footage that is unbelievably easy to record literally at the touch of a button with great looking video and great sounding audio. Because I have access to larger cameras that you can see behind me, I'm obviously not shooting to get the most cinematic footage possible out of this Osmo. But if you were, you can actually take full manual control over these settings like you would with a professional camera. So let's go through that. So to control the pro or auto area of the settings, you just swipe out from the right here and you can see that you've got this button that says pro. If that's disabled, just tap it and you'll get all of the pro controls. So I leave my exposure at auto, my white balance on auto as well. I want those things to both be taken care of. Glamour effect, I'm always going to turn off because I definitely don't want any kind of changes to my skin or face or anything like that. In terms of color, you can go from HLG, you can go from D-Log, or you can go to normal color. I'm going to stay on normal. You may well want to shoot, if you're going for super cinematic footage, you might want to shoot on D-Log, which is going to give you a flat picture profile that you can grade afterwards. For me personally, again, I like to use this like a vlogging camera. I just want everything to look great out of camera straight away. However, there are a few adjustments that I'm going to make in the sharpness area. I'm going to leave noise reduction to 0, but I am going to reduce the sharpness. I'm actually going to reduce the digital sharpness to -2. And then in terms of focus mode, you get a few different controls here. So you can go from single to continuous or product showcase mode. I'm going to leave it on continuous here because basically you kind of want the camera to focus on whatever is in the frame at that moment in time. If we tap on the top here, we can go to the audio section. The channel, I'm actually want that on mono. That's going to give you a mono audio track. I'm going to keep wind noise reduction off because again, if I'm kind of out and about in a slightly more vlogging setup, I'm going to take advantage of the noise cancellation. And directional audio, again, if you are doing vlogging, you actually might want to change this to front and back. But if you know you're always recording from the front, you might want to change that as well. So let's go back to the video controls here. If you are wanting very, very cinematic footage and you're trying to essentially get the most beautiful footage possible out of your Osmo, you will want to change around with your white balance. You're going to want to change that to manual white balance so you don't have shifting of white balance in your frame. If you're out in everyday life, in the sun, that type of thing, you might want to sit on 5600 Kelvin. That's kind of standard daylight. But then where the magic really happens is actually in the exposure controls, because we'll shift this over to manual. And if I am, for instance, filming in 25 frames a second, I want to double my frame rate. So you're going to shoot on 1/50, and then you'll want to control your ISO. This is going to mean that the camera's not able to adjust its exposures, which means if you are in bright light, DJI actually sells ND attachments to reduce the amount of light coming in through the camera. And that is more in line with how a professional camera system works. A hot tip when using the Osmo Pocket 3 is to always remember a micro SD card. So there is no internal storage in this camera, and I can't tell you the amount of times I end up taking it out and just not remembering a micro SD. For some reason, this doesn't actually happen to me with larger cameras, bigger SD cards or CF cards. I just always seem to forget about it because it's so tiny. So a quick warning on micro SD cards, they can be low quality and fairly cheap, and that means from time to time they can fail. I actually have had times previously when I'm using micro SD cards, normally in drones on professional work, where sometimes like the card actually kind of like malfunctions or files don't write properly to them. So first things first, make sure you're using a high quality micro SD card. But if all else fails and you do run into this problem of files being written incorrectly or corrupted, you can actually use something like Wondershare Repair It, who are actually the sponsor of today's video. Because on that job, obviously footage shot for a professional job is obviously quite important. You can't have those files being corrupted. And we were actually able to take that file, run it through Repair It, and it was fully usable afterwards. It genuinely can be a complete lifesaver. Repair It V6 has actually just arrived, and that brings more support for additional files like B-RAW, so Blackmagic RAW you can now repair, high efficiency image formats like HEIT files, which for me personally is really useful because I obviously shoot a lot of smartphone photos, and you can repair corrupted GoPro gyroscope files, which is actually the only software right now that can fix those files for you. So this is one of those pieces of software that you hope you don't need, but when inevitably you do run into files that are corrupted or damaged, you are going to be so glad that Wondershare Repair It exists, just like I was. You can check it out using the top link in the description. Thank you to Wondershare for supporting the channel, and let's get back to the Osmo Pocket 3. There's a couple more settings we do need to talk about here. If you tap the bottom left, this is where you can change your mode. So you can actually go through like photo mode, you can go from panoramas, you've got custom settings, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but you can go right over. This is where you can activate low light video mode. If you're in a low light video environment, I would thoroughly recommend you actually stay on the low light mode, because this is going to just enable a few more kind of low light algorithms that DJI have got going on in the camera, and they are actually very, very good. It shoots great low light video, so just take advantage of that. You can shoot in slow motion as well. So that would be if you're wanting to go higher, so that as you can see, if we swipe up here, you can actually see that you get 4K 120 frames per second, up to 8 times. So 8 times 240 frames a second, or you can go to 4K and you can choose up to 100 frames a second or 120 frames a second. This is a fantastic feature, and it's amazing that it can happen in such a little camera. One feature I actually think a lot of people don't know about is you can actually plug your Osmo directly into your computer via the USB-C port on the bottom of the camera and use it as a webcam, which is obviously insanely underrated. A webcam of this standard of camera will probably cost you a couple of $100s anyway, so you are saving a ton of money if you decide to use the Osmo in this way. Then finally we have the top level section, so you just swipe down at the top here. The top left is where we'll set custom modes. I'm not going to touch that for now, we'll talk about that in a little while. This option here is called screen rotate and capture. Basically what this is going to do is if you toggle that on and you turn the screen, rotate the screen, it's automatically going to start rolling. It's essentially like the fastest way to capture footage on the Osmo. I personally don't want this to happen, which is why this is off, but if you are wanting to capture things right as they happen, you're in an environment that is going to be useful, you could toggle that on. Here's your screen brightness, pretty self-explanatory. We'll go back here. This is where you enable FT selfie. This is going to be essentially face tracking on selfie mode. You can see that if I go onto the main screen, we'll rotate this. You can see that my face, once it actually picks it up, is going to be tracked, and that setting is going to control that. Very, very useful, especially if you are vlogging. If we head into the settings, this is where your kind of slightly more in detail settings for the camera are. A lot of these settings are fairly self-explanatory. I'm not actually going to go through these individually one by one, but there are a couple I just want to call out. If we scroll down here, you can go to joystick speed, and you can see that you're actually able to control the speed of your gimbal. So if you just scroll that up here, maybe we can scroll that to a 2 or something. If we go on the main camera page here, you can see that the speed of the gimbal is just much, much slower, which actually might be better if you are wanting to actually film and pan at the same time. And then the only other thing I wanted to call out here is the video compression. If you are wanting the most size efficient files, you'll be able to record the most video possible. You leave it on HEVC, but if you're wanting to do a lot with these files, maybe you're putting them in a whole bunch of projects, that type of thing, you're going to want to change that to H.264. This button here will allow you to change your orientation without rotating the screen. This one here will be your rotational speed. I'm going to always leave this on default unless you're doing anything particularly quick in terms of like you're like running around with the gimbal or capturing sports or anything like that. So we'll leave that on default. And then finally, this area here, if any of you have used gimbals in the past, you'll be kind of experienced with the different modes for gimbals available. But tilt lock will just not allow the gimbal to rotate on the tilt axis. As you can see, like I'm going here, it's moving side by side, but it's not moving up or down. And then FPV will allow full control, as you can see how much movement there is in the gimbal. And then follow will do both, just a little bit slower. Again, for vlogging or anything like that, you're going to want to leave that on follow. And so we've customized a lot of settings here. The last tip I have for you is actually saving these custom settings to ensure you don't have to repeat this process every single time. And you could, for instance, create one profile for more cinematic footage and one more vlog-like footage. So let's go through that. So all you're going to want to do is basically go into the top left here, and you can see that you get an option. I've got C1, that's basically my vlogging profile, but you can actually do, these are slightly more manual controls that I've configured. So I'm going to add that. Then to enable the footage, you just go on here and you can see that your custom settings are saved here. So you just go up here. I'm going to go over to C1, which is my automatic setting, and you can see that that's just instantly applied. And so guys, there we have it. Those are my Osmo settings. Hopefully you found it helpful. Let me know if any of you guys have tips down below in the comments, and we'll see you guys next time.